Everyone, and welcome to Mastodon Career Call, sponsored by IPFW Career Services. Today's webinar is focused on how to negotiate salary without going crazy, and we're also going to be talking a little bit about benefits. Today's presenter is Jennifer Fisher. She is the Culture and Retention Manager for Group Deco, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Jennifer.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I am exceptionally excited to be on this webinar with you. This is a subject that freaks people out, quite honestly. If you've never negotiated a salary, the idea of doing it can be daunting at best and crazy scary at worst. So we're going to talk about some strategies today and some other things that you can just keep in mind as you're talking through some of these things. So really kind of what we're going to talk about today, learn why people don't negotiate. So like I said, fear a big part of it. What impact can not negotiating have on your future? And definitely there are some studies that show that there is a negative impact on your future. How can you prepare for negotiations? So there's definitely some information you need to come to a negotiation with in order to be successful in that process. And so we'll talk through that. And then we'll just talk about some tips and tricks to help you be successful in the negotiation process. And so that's our things we're going to talk about today, and hopefully you gain something out of it. So a little bit about me. So my last job, the first one that I'm in right now, so this is the very first time I ever negotiated a salary. Prior to this, I really kind of took whatever somebody gave me and said, all right, yay, you're paying me, I'm good to go. And so I decided to take a step back from that in this position and thought, you know, I have a great job already. I got nothing to lose. I might as well try and negotiate, and did it quite successfully. And so I'm going to tell you some of the things about my story and how I got to this point, and some tricks that I learned that helped me to be successful towards my negotiation as well. But as Ashley said, I'm the Culture and Retention Manager for a company called Group Deco. We're in Garrett, Indiana. And I am the person that does their salary hiring. And so I'm heavily involved on the employer side of things in negotiations. Like I said, I've been on the employee side of things for negotiations. And so I'll tell you from both perspectives today just exactly what to work through and what you need to be thinking about. So when we start talking about negotiations, there are definitely some reasons why people choose not to negotiate. And really kind of what I said at the beginning. People have a huge fear. There is a fear associated with what if I say something that's too high, or I say something in the negotiation that freaks out the employer and they withdraw the offer. Quite honestly, that can happen. However, you can't let fear get in your way of trying to negotiate. So you really do need to at least give it an opportunity to work. And no trying means no chance for negotiation. So definitely that's one reason why people will choose not to negotiate. The other reason that we typically see is sometimes people just don't feel like they have the skill set to negotiate. It does take quite a bit of communication. It takes great sales skills. And so we will definitely start talking about what does this mean in terms of what kind of skills you need to be thinking about taking into the negotiation side of things. But really, those are two of the biggest reasons we see why people will choose not to negotiate when they're talking to an employer. So why is this important? And this is absolutely important towards your future. When we start talking about why you need to negotiate, here's the reality. Studies have shown that an individual who doesn't negotiate a good first salary stands to miss out on more than $500,000. So $500,000 by the time you're 60 that you could potentially lose out on by not negotiating a good solid first salary. And when you think about this, we see a lot of studies that show people who come out of college and into their first careers in a terrible economy, it takes them sometimes decades to catch up to a salary that they would have been at had they come out in a really good timeline in our economy. And so when we talk about how important your first salary is coming out of college, it really is kind of critical to your success. I know for me personally, I was a social worker, and social workers do not traditionally make a lot of money. That really did pigeonhole me for a lot of years into a very low salary until I learned how to start negotiating and selling myself into some positions where I was able to up that by quite a bit. But it really does impact your future if you don't take the time to negotiate. So there is some benefits really to doing this. Really the other thing, and the flip side of things, is you can negotiate too low so you can miss out on money, But you can negotiate too high and miss out an opportunity. And so, again, that comes down to fear. A lot of people are not willing to negotiate because they're afraid of over-negotiating and really losing out on a position. And I won't lie to you, it is possible that this can happen to you. We have seen candidates who have not done research, have not done their homework to understand what the region pays and what the opportunity pays, and have really oversold what we can pay them. And so they have lost out on opportunity with that. However, what I will tell you is you have to at least start with something. So even if you negotiate too high, if you know for sure that you can take lower pay, be willing to negotiate on that. So you're never stuck in a number, but there is a point where you have to sometimes make that decision to walk away. But you do need to recognize that you can negotiate too high and you may potentially lose out. And so we do see that actually happening to some people. But here's what I'll tell you. The good news is that there are a lot of employers who are actually expecting you to negotiate. When we put out a number for a salary, we very rarely expect that someone's going to accept that right off the bat. We do expect some negotiation. And we will talk later on, it's not just about money. So there are some negotiation wiggle rooms in terms of benefits and what that looks like, and some things that we'll talk about throughout this webinar that really have an opportunity to impact the total deal that you get. But do understand coming to the table that I would say that the vast majority of employers do expect people to negotiate. Even when the economy is not good, we are expecting that. And if you've got something to offer an employer, absolutely expect that you've got something to bring to them and be able to negotiate with them, and that absolutely can work to your benefit. So just some things that I want you to think about as we're talking about the tips and tricks and all the fun stuff I'm going to tell you in this. I do want you to keep in mind 3 facts. Number 1, you have to actually ask. So if you don't ask about negotiation, if you don't ask about a different salary, they're going to assume that you're okay with the salary that they've given you and that they're offering, and nothing else is going to be said. They're not going to come to you and say, hey, we're going to throw out a number to you. Is that okay? Do you want more? No employer is going to say that. They're going to toss out a number at you, and you have to be the one who's willing to say, is this negotiable? Here's where I want it to be. And then we're going to talk about why you need to back that statement up. But you do have to ask to negotiate a different salary and benefits. Number 2, not asking for a negotiation, not asking for more money could mean that you're leaving money on the table. I think that every employer out there is in the same boat that our company is in. You're working to try and save as much money as you can. You want to be fair to candidates. You want to give them a fair offer. But at the end of the day, you're looking at your bottom line to say, can we afford to do this? And so really, that's one thing that you need to recognize, is that if you fail to ask, then you are leaving some potential money on the table, because most companies have a range that they're willing to pay an employee, that they're willing to pay a candidate. They have some wiggle room within that that can work with and negotiate with. Now, if you get outside of that range and it goes above what they say they can pay, then you get into that situation where you may not be able to negotiate up. Sometimes you can if you can back up your statements, but there is usually some wiggle room in most negotiations to go up. And so you do have to do your homework. You got to talk about it, but understand you always got some wiggle room to work with. Number 3 is this is not always about money. So when you get to the point where if they can't wiggle at all on money, start thinking about other benefits that you could actually ask for in the negotiation process. I think that's one rare area where some people fail in negotiations because they assume that it's only about salary. And it's not. There are a number of benefits that you can actually negotiate that we'll talk about here in a minute that really can benefit your overall package. And when we talk about quality of life and we talk about the important things to you as a person and an individual, then there are some things that sometimes, quite honestly, are more important than money. Me personally, I'll take time off more than I'll take a higher salary any day of the week because that's valuable to me. So we'll talk about why that can be important to you as we start to move forward in this discussion. Okay, so let's talk about some helpful tips, because as we talked earlier, a lot of people are scared or just don't have the skill set in order to negotiate. They don't know where to start with it. So we're going to talk about some things that hopefully will help you as you're moving into this process. Definitely some things that you need to think about in advance of going into this process as you're starting to think through interviewing, when you're thinking about even sometimes sending out resumes. you have to know how to target people. And so thinking through those things can be beneficial at the beginning. And so here's really kind of your first step. You really need to research both your position that you're applying to. So let's say you've already gone through the interview process. You know that eventually you're going to get an offer. You really truly need to do some research to be able to tell yourself, A, what's acceptable in the market, because that is one of the biggest downfalls that I think many candidates make, is they don't understand the market. And a lot of times I actually see this in candidates who come from other areas. So not used to living in Northeast Indiana, used to living in a larger city. Well, clearly salaries in larger cities are going to be much higher than they're actually going to be in our area. So you do need to understand that going into the area. If you're looking to negotiate outside of Northeast Indiana, understand what that market looks like. And so you do have to be very cautious about how you approach this, and research is really truly your best tool to do this. So here's one of the best things I can show you. There's a website out there called salary.com, and on the left side of your screen you're going to see some web links down at the bottom that's going to give you some really good information. You can click on those, get to some information, but here's what I love about salary.com is it allows you to take a job title and look up what is the typical pay range that you see for that area. You can look in terms of city, state, region, so it does allow you to really siphon down into what you can make. It shows you the lower end of pay, the mid-range of pay, all the way up to the high end of pay. Now here's what I will tell you, is you need to be armed with that information, and you have to know the region that you're going into, even down to the type of company that you're going into. Now you may find a salary range, let's say, we'll use human resources as a great example. So human resources manager. So if I were to go into salary.com, look up a human resources manager, I'm going to find a pretty wide range of salary opportunities, plus a variety of potential titles that can be associated with that. And so what I need to do with that information is, okay, that gives me a starting base. I know that I can make somewhere around $60,000 to $70,000 as an HR manager, sometimes more depending on the company, sometimes less depending on the company. But I know that I at least have a starting range. Here's the great thing about knowing that range, is that that at least gives me a starting point. If they came in much lower than that, then I know I need to do some more research on that company or specifically on their industry. There are some industries that traditionally do pay lower than others, and you do need to pay attention to those. So if you can actually look into detail, sometimes you can even find detail on specific counties and find very specific companies and where they are in the wage scale in their county. That information can be hugely helpful to you. Again, what you don't want to do, even if you're armed with this information, is walk into a negotiation with a company that doesn't necessarily pay at that rate and assume that you're going to get that rate. So you do need to do some more background checks other than just the salary information. There's some other research that you need to do, but that's a really good starting point. So here's kind of what it looks like, and so when you run a search, this is what it's going to give you, is a pretty good range of what you can expect. I will tell you that if you're coming in with no experience, expect to be on the lower range. So one of the things that I see a lot of people making a mistake on is you see, all right, a salary range from $63,000 to $107,000. Well, I want to be at $107,000. I think I'm worth that. Well, everyone has to view you as worth that if that's what you're going to ask for. So you have to assume that the higher range that you're looking for at that salary is someone who has a ton of experience, a perfect background for what they're looking for, and there's a lot that goes into that. I will throw out that there's another website that you can actually go to that should feed into your research, and we didn't put this on the web link. So it's called ONET, and if you were just to Google ONET, it's going to give you their website. It is a great place to go because it allows you to actually look up job titles and see what that job title has for experience, what you can expect in terms of skill sets that are needed. I always recommend to job seekers, go there first, see the job that you're looking to apply for, and see how your skill set matches up to it. If you've gotten any sort of a job description from the company that you're actually applying for, which quite honestly you should have, if you're to the point of potentially getting an offer, you should be able to ask for a position description from them. Look at what the things are that they're looking for. If you match up on every single level that they're looking for, whether it be on experience, education, the types of skill sets that they're looking for, then absolutely, you can expect to make in the higher range of the salary. But if there are some things that you feel like you are a little bit deficient in and need to work on, you can't expect to get at that higher salary. And so you do need to be very conscientious of that as you're going about that, and that can be really beneficial as you're thinking through your research. I also recommend going to the company's website individually. Take a look at who their people are. So LinkedIn is a great resource to look people up that actually work for that organization. Look at job titles, look at where those people have been before, and take those job titles and look at what is the average salary for that. Sometimes that information can actually be beneficial to you as well, because it tells you, are people working for this company and are they making a decent amount of money? And so that can be a good starting point when you're talking about salary negotiations. You do need to be armed with this information. If you walk into a salary negotiation not knowing what the region pays, not knowing what the job title pays, that's when you run the risk of either lowballing yourself or making it such a highball offer that they're never going to accept it. So knowing this information is going to be a great starting place for your negotiation standpoint. Here's the other thing I'll recommend to you. Know what you need to make as a baseline to pay all of your bills. I think that's another issue that I see from candidates, is that a lot of times they don't know what they need to make. And so, again, you may get yourself into hot water that you're taking a salary that may not allow you to pay your bills. We're watching the cost of education rise. We're watching the cost of living rise. Well, you need to make a baseline salary that allows you to pay those bills. So you need to be armed with even that information when you walk into a negotiation, because there may be a point where someone's going to offer you a salary that you just cannot take. Depending on your situation, depending on your need for a job, there are times when you may need to actually look at whether or not you can pay your bills versus the job and the salary offer that you're getting. So that, again, coupled with the information about the types of salaries that you can expect to make in certain job titles, this is going to arm you with enough information to give you a range that you know that you can accept and a range that you may need to walk away from. And so all of this information is really going to start to build out and allow you to have a really good foundation for whether or not you can negotiate on the salary that you're looking to take. So all of this is really good starting points. And here's what I would tell you to do. Start looking at what would it cost you for rent? What's it going to cost you for your groceries in an average month? What are you going to need to pay for your bills? Eventually, your education bills, if you're still in school, they're going to kick back in if you've got them within 6 months of graduating. So what are those going to look like? What are the things that, if you want to go out and have fun, what do you need to make? So all of those things, set yourself up with a budget of a minimum amount of money that you need to make every month in order to pay your bills. Good starting place. So that's going to be critical for you. Here's the other thing I'm going to tell you, and it's another area that a lot of candidates, I think, unfortunately don't do well. You need to know yourself pretty well. You need to know what you bring to the table. You clearly already know that they're interested in you. If you're to the point of getting a salary offer and a job offer, you know they like you, so that's a good starting place. What you don't know is if they have other candidates that they also like. So you could, one way or another, get yourself into some hot water if you negotiate too high because you didn't have the right information coming into it, and they have other candidates they can look at. But you really do need to know what you bring to the table for this company. You've already sold them on the fact that you can work well for them. Now when you're going into a salary negotiation, you don't only have to reiterate that information, but you kind of got to take it a step further and really showcase what your goals are coming into this position. This can really show that you have an idea about what you're going to do with the position, what your personal goals are. So first 6 months, what do you want to accomplish? And then what do you see on the horizon for yourself next couple of years for this company? How can you help them grow? How can you affect their bottom line? Knowing these things can really help you in the negotiation process because it allows you to have true data that you can point to and say, I know that I am able to do these things for you as a company. Here's why I think I'm valuable enough to get this salary. So those things really are going to impact the types of negotiations as you start to go into them. And here's one thing that I'll tell you. I am a huge fan of SWOT analysis. If you're a business major, you likely know what a SWOT analysis is. If you're not a business major, you probably have no idea what it is. So here's what I like about it. A SWOT analysis is really looking at strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So that's it. That's all you're looking at is 4 different things. I always tell candidates, and you should be doing this even before you interview with someone, but look at your strengths. What are the things that you really have the opportunity to do very, very well for this company? What are some areas that maybe are going to be potential downfalls and weaknesses for you? What are some opportunities that you're going to have coming into this company? And again, that points back to goals that you might have for them. If you've already interviewed with the company, you should be very, very well versed with enough information for you to be able to say, here's what I have to offer you. If you haven't gotten all of your questions answered in the interview setting, make sure you get all of your questions answered, because that allows you to be armed with the right information to know what you're going to be able to do for this company. I think, unfortunately, a lot of people tend to come into it and think, what am I getting? So what am I going to get out of this process? What you need to be thinking heading into a negotiation is, what can I give to this process? What can I offer you that maybe another candidate can't offer? And so that's going to be really critical, is understanding yourself, understanding what you need to make, and understanding what the baseline salaries are for the job that you're applying for are normally going to get. And that is going to arm you with the type of information that you need in order to be successful in your negotiation process. So that's going to be important. So it kind of all starts with this, right? You've had your resume got you the interview. Well, in the interview, you have to have wowed them. I mean, ultimately wowed them to a point where they're looking at you as the candidate that they need to have. And that's really, when you walk out of an interview, that's how you should set them up, is you can't live without me. As a company, I am always looking for that candidate that I can't live without, that they're going to come in here and they're going to wow everybody, because that makes me look good as a recruiter. If I found somebody that wows everybody, perfect. I just did my job well. So I am always looking for candidates like this. I'm looking for people who can come in, know that they can impact the company, know that they can do their job really, really well, and it all starts in the interview. All of these things, from the interview to the negotiation side of things, all starts with you making a really good first impression. If at any point along the line the company is like, yeah, we can hire him, he's going to be good, or she's going to be good, then you're probably not selling yourself in the right way. But if they're walking out of your interview going, gosh, we have to have him, then you have absolutely done your job in the interview, and you've sold them on the fact that they need to have you. And that's where you have some negotiating power, and that's a good thing. So always go into the interview, to every meeting that you have with them from that point forward, with the idea that you're going to be highly professional, and you're just going to set it up in their mind that they can't live without you as a company. Now, I will tell you that the negotiation process definitely starts with a conversation. This can either be over the phone, it can be in person, but it's always going to be a conversation. So you do need to communicate really clearly about what you're looking for. That, again, means that all of that research that you've done about salaries, all of the research that you've done about the company, the industry, yourself, all of that plays into this conversation, because you're going to need to have a really well-formatted idea about how you're going to approach negotiations. If they've given you a number and that number is something that you want to negotiate on, you better write down exactly what you're hoping to get out of it. I had started my negotiation with my current company. I literally wrote down everything that I thought that I brought to the table, everything that I thought that I could do really, really well for them. And then I wrote down a number of where I wanted to be, and I just backed it up with information. So here's what I've done before. Here's what I know you need. Here's what I think I have the capability to do for you in the next 6 months, next 2 years, next 5 years. And I backed it up with information. That's why I feel like I was successful in the negotiation process. Now, I will tell you, I didn't get the first number that I asked for. We negotiated back and forth until we both settled on something that we were both happy with, and I was thrilled. But again, I knew what range I was looking at, and I knew I wasn't going below a certain range, and I knew that they probably weren't going above a certain range, because I knew what their salary range was for the position. So those all play into how you start doing this. But I will tell you, be organized and be prepared when you pick up that phone or you walk through that door. If you haven't really rehearsed this, if you haven't really gone through the process of thinking through what you're going to say and how you'll react to certain conversations, then you're not going to be successful in the negotiation side of things. So you really do need to be thinking through. I even say, and career services, correct me if I'm wrong, go in and practice it. Set up an appointment with your career services people and practice doing this. Tell them what the salary offer is and go in and practice what you're going to say. I'm a big believer in practice makes perfect. So how will you know how you're going to do in the big conversation if you haven't gone through it in your head or in person with somebody before you actually have it? So practice, practice, practice. You're going to be more successful that way. I think my friends were absolutely tired before I walked into the negotiations with my company because I was constantly going, all right, this is what I'm going to say. I think by the time I was done, they were like, Jen, just stop, go do it already. It's going to either work or it's not going to work. Okay. So I really did have to practice those things because I was exceptionally nervous walking into it. Again, I had a good job. I liked what I was doing, so there was really no pressure if they said no to me. But I figured I had nothing to lose because I really wanted their job too. So it did offer me a good opportunity being well-versed in practice and what I wanted to do. You do have to be confident too. If you're walking in there with any sense of you're not sure about yourself or about the skills and the things that you have to offer, it's going to come across to them. So you need to walk in there confidently knowing that you have an opportunity to do something good for them. I used to coach volleyball, and I told my players all the time, walk into the gym as though you own it. It's your gym. Well, there's a flip side to that. You can be so confident that you come off egotistical, and you don't want to be that. You don't want to be seen as somebody who has a high ego, but you do want to be confident in this. So state why you feel like you're good for it. State why you think that you're going to be able to do something positive for them, but back it up at the same time. You can't just talk about what you can do for them. You have to back it up with what you've already done. So it can definitely help you from that perspective, but you do got to be confident about it. And that's where, again, that practice and going through it and knowing what you're going to say, knowing what the background is on the position can very much help you feel confident going into that particular thing. I always tell people when you're heading into the negotiation, talk about how you can affect the bottom line for a company. As a recruiter going into my position, I knew how much money they had spent on recruiting last year, and that I armed myself with that information. So I knew that they spent an astronomical amount of money because they had hired outside recruiters. Well, just bringing in an on-site recruiter was automatically going to be able to reduce that number if I was successful in what I did. So I really did go in with a plan and said, for the next month, next 3 months, next 6 months, here's my goal. And it was all about reducing that amount of money that they were spending and some of the tools and things that I knew I could bring into them. That helped me in my negotiation because it immediately impacted their bottom line. Now, it does mean that I have to make sure that I'm valuing my own salary. So as I save money for my company, I have to save enough for my position because my position is brand new. I knew that coming into it. And again, that helped me be prepared with anything that I needed to negotiate out of that. So I will tell you as much information as you can get about the company. Ask them as much as you can about how they're doing financially. Look up information online, look up on LinkedIn and find people, but be willing to ask those questions. If you're not armed with information about the company, you can't necessarily do that. And so you do need to know how you impact that and what you can do with that. Sometimes that can be really difficult to do coming straight out of college and coming into an entry-level position, but there is something that you bring to the table, and you have to be able to sell that to them. That's going to be critical. Again, I'm going to tell you, you cannot be shy. I know for me personally, and a lot of people are really surprised by this, I'm actually a very, very shy person, to the point where I was the kid that used to hide behind my mom when somebody would try to talk to me. Well, I've had to get past that. And a lot of times we see that shy people tend not to want to negotiate. And that was really me in the beginning of my career. I very much just accepted whatever salary somebody gave me, and I never negotiated on it because I was too shy to do it. I thought, well, would they view me as being too pushy? Would they view me as this? And I didn't want that image. Well, what I've learned over the course of my career is you really have to be proactive about how you approach your career. If you're looking to be at a certain level salary-wise, if you're looking to be at a certain level position-wise, you have to be somewhat aggressive about it, and you have to very much own it. And so I had to really get myself away from being shy. I had to kind of force myself into that mode of, this probably isn't an easy conversation, but I need to have it. And knowing that employers are okay with you negotiating really did help me to get past that because I expected that. So I will tell you that if you're a shy person, you really do have to get past that and know what you have to offer somebody. I think with a lot of people, it's hard to understand your own skill sets it's hard to understand what you have to offer, but you do need to sit down and do that SWOT analysis about yourself and know what your potential is and what you have the potential to showcase to an employer for them. And again, it comes down to sales skills. It's funny that people are always surprised when I tell them that getting a job is a sales job. You're literally selling a product. The product is you. So you have to really understand it. So think about if you were selling, let's say, a bottle of water. What would you do to sell that bottle of water? There's going to be certain things that you're going to pick out that offer people, you're going to quench your thirst, it's good for your body, blah, 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 blah. So there are things that you would do to sell that bottle of water. Use yourself as that example. What would you do to sell yourself? You've already done the hard work because they've already offered you something. That's a good starting place. You know they want you. So what you have to do now is sell why you want more money. And that's the harder part for most people, is what does that mean for you? And again, it goes back to what do you have to offer the company? And so that's really where you're going to sell what you have the opportunity to do for them. And you're going to be able to do it. I think if people are thinking that they can't do something like this, I'm going to tell you it's not as hard as you think it's going to be. And that's really the key point to it, is you just have to be willing to sell yourself in it. You do need to be patient in this process. I think that's the hardest thing for people. There are times when you may throw out a number and it may take a couple of days, it may take a week, because it may mean that somebody has to get permission from someone else. And there is a process involved in that. So it may not happen overnight where you're going to get an answer or a counter offer to your negotiation. It does take some patience. Don't freak out if you send an offer to somebody and you negotiate on it and you haven't heard back from the employer. Don't freak out. There's a good likelihood that they're talking about it internally, seeing if they can do it from a company perspective. But you do need to be open to the fact that they could come back with a different number. And so this is really kind of a push-pull. It's no different than if you were going to buy a car. You would negotiate that price with the salesperson, and both of you are going to keep throwing back numbers until you settle on something. That takes some time to do. So just be willing to wait through the process. I promise it's not going to be terrible, and it's going to be okay. And really, this is what we said at the beginning. This process is not always about money. I think that most people look at negotiations and only think that this is about money. This isn't. I mean, sure, you want to get more money out of it and you want to look at a certain salary. But what happens if the employer can't pay more money? They literally have got you at the top end of the salary range that they've got, and they can't afford to pay you more. Well, what are some other things that you can look at? And here's the great thing. There are a wealth of benefits that you can look at with a company. It can be things like asking them if you're currently working and you know that you're going to have to be on your health insurance is going to end and you're not going to get your new one for 60 days, asking them to pay for your COBRA. That is one thing that you can negotiate in the process. If you don't have any insurance currently, then unfortunately sometimes you just have to wait through their process. Asking for more time off. Sometimes companies do have some wiggle room, especially if they're not a union in a contracted kind of position. Then you do have some wiggle room sometimes to ask for more time off. I would say that most people start off at 1 to 2 weeks in the first year of employment, but if you can showcase the fact that you have something to offer them, there may be some wiggle room in asking for some more vacation, asking for more time off. Like I said at the beginning, I actually value that far more than I value salary because I really love time off. And I think that there are a lot of people out there that also enjoy that work-life balance, and so that can be good. Sometimes you can negotiate on a flexible schedule. So if you're not the normal 8 to 5 or 7 to 4 kind of person, sometimes you can negotiate to maybe have a different schedule than that. If you're one of those people that, likes to stay up late, maybe you can negotiate that. I'm not going to tell you that that's always going to happen because most businesses do have operating hours and they do need you to be there during operating hours, but I will tell you some positions can be done from anywhere. And so that does give you some wiggle room as a negotiation tool to walk in and talk about. You can talk about location. For me personally, during the summer, I actually work from home on Fridays. So there's some flexibility in that for me to be able to have worked that out. Many places allow you to do that. They may have different operating hours during the summer that allow you to negotiate. And so always look at the benefits package that they're offering you and see if there's any wiggle room in that if you're not able to get to a different salary level than what they're offering you. And understand that we're looking at a full package. Everything that we want to look at really does come in, and it's a full package that you're looking at. Some things are going to be stagnant, and that means that you can't really wiggle on them. Usually health benefits, retirement benefits are one of those. Vacation usually has some wiggle room in it for the most part. Again, flexible schedules can work, different timelines like that. So do be willing to look at what their benefits offerings are, and if you have some wiggle room that you can do on that, there may be some things to do. And I will tell you that sometimes it's like a poker game. I mean, you literally are playing a poker game, and you got to know when to hold your ground, and you got to know when to just go ahead and accept the offer and move forward. That takes some time to learn. What I will tell you is take your cues off of the employer. If it seems like they're starting to get uncomfortable with the negotiation, if it seems like they're starting to worry about some of the things that you're asking for, then you have to make a decision. Is it worth it for you to hold out because that's what you want to get, or is it worth it for you to go ahead and say, you know what, I'm going to accept the package as is? You really do truly need to know when to say yes, when to say no, and when to say maybe. And I'm going to be honest, what you're going for is a win-win. You want to get something out of it. The company wants to get something out of it. Quite frankly, both of us are looking to get something important. You want to either get a higher salary, a different benefit structure. The company wants to be able to get a great employee very cost effectively. So both of you can walk away from a negotiation coming up with something that works for both of you. But again, you can't do that if you're not armed with the right information for yourself. If you haven't gone into the negotiation understanding salary requirements, understanding what you personally need to make, then you may not get a win-win situation. But here's what I'll tell you, is that as you're thinking through negotiations, think through where you want to be as a professional. So if you're looking to be at a certain salary range, if you're looking to be in a certain position, do you have the skill sets currently, or are there other things that you need to be thinking about that up your potential? For me personally, like I said, I started off in social work. Well, unfortunately, social work traditionally has a lower starting salary, and it was taking me a very, very long time to catch up salary-wise. I'll be honest with you. I wasn't making more than $25,000 when I started my career. My next jump was to $30,000. Well, I stayed at $30,000 for nearly 10 years because I needed to make the decision to go back to school. Now, I will tell you that what I found is since I went back to school, I was able to showcase the fact that I have more to offer an employer, and it has done a lot for my salary upgrade. So there are certain things that you may have to do personally to kind of upgrade yourself to get you to a next salary range if you find that you're getting stifled in those specific salary ranges. But you do need to understand yourself. You do need to understand the career goals that you have for yourself and what you have to offer people. The other thing that I will tell you is that you'll be successful in this, especially if you can showcase to an employer that you have loyalty. Many employers are not willing to take a risk on somebody at a higher salary range if they think they're only going to have you for a couple of years. So you do need to showcase loyalty, and you can do those things somewhere else, the presentation, but at the end of this presentation, I'll is very helpful. So we do have some time for questions, and so I do want to make sure that we take some time if anybody's got something. Wendy asks, what if an employee application asks for a specific salary amount rather than a salary range? Okay, so that does happen. I very quite honestly ask where people are at currently for a salary range and what they want to be making. And so you're going to be in that situation where it's asking you very specifically to tell what your salary history is or what you've been that you're going to. Again, sometimes it means that you may need to make really tough decisions about your career path so that you don't get pigeonholed in, because there is always that risk that you get stuck in another salary because you're trying to work your way back up in a downsized position. So I hope that helps, Wendy. What I will tell you is just be willing to negotiate in the new spot. Jeffrey asks, is there a way to negotiate on what they're I'm sad that I didn't do it much earlier because about it, and they will help you get set up with it. So